Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So I'm going to talk about the four wisdoms, which you can find in the place that I know and go to find them is Zen is Eternal Life. There's a writing called the Shishogi. In the copy of the book that I have, it's page 159. And it's a writing that was compiled by our Japanese ancestor. It was not by him directly, but later students, hundreds of years later. I think my teacher said it was like in the 1800s that they took various sentences from his work, Great Master Dogen's work, the Shobogenzo, and compiled it all together so that you could kind of get an idea of what Dogen was teaching, called the Shishogi. And I think it's the fourth part is called Awakening the Mind of the Bodhisattva, and he talks about these four wisdoms, which again, if I remember correctly, another monk had been giving a talk about it, and actually it traces back even to the Buddha, who, this originally comes from the Buddha, talking about these four wisdoms, these four aspects of our practice, which are really our meditation practice being put into our daily life. When we do our practice, when we are meditating and doing our training, naturally these aspects will come into our daily life, will be expressions of our training, expressions of what we call Buddha nature, which I think some of you who have been following these sessions might be familiar with that term now. Just so, to have a context while I'm introducing this, the four wisdoms are charity, tenderness, benevolence, and sympathy. And when you sit and reflect on these, you can, I think it can be easy to see how, when one is practicing a religious path, a spiritual path, how those things would naturally begin to flow out from us. And these aren't things that we are, as trainees, going out to seek. It's not something we have to go outside of ourselves to seek. It's something that we already have within us that we are letting out, trying to get ourselves out of the way. So the first one, charity, in reflecting on this, when I have looked at generosity and charity in my own life and practice, I think charity has a wonderful way of helping us to open our hearts. We become less self-absorbed and thinking about others, and all of these will do that. And charity is kind of a way that we can begin to do that. We can always give. We always have the ability to give either material things or just our time, our attention to things. Charity doesn't necessarily have to be material. It can be our time and attention and love. And when we aspire to give, we have to do our best to let go of the idea of what's being given and who we're trying to give to, any sort of idea about what, or agenda, any sort of agenda. I had a great situation with one of the monks here who's now deceased, so this was a few years ago. He and I were at a store, and there was a person with a sign out in front of the store begging for food or money or help or whatever. And I said, It's kind of embarrassing, so you just have to bear with me on this. But so I was saying to Rivermaster Chose, I said, oh, we should get him a donut. And I said about myself how in the past, I had always kind of felt off about giving someone money. I was always happy to give them food, but I didn't necessarily want to give him money because was he going to just go off and buy alcohol and drugs with it? And Reverend Master Jose, he turned to me and he looked at me and he says, that guy's an adult. Your job is just to be generous. Like, don't worry about what he's going to do or not do with what you give him. He's an adult. Let him make his own decisions. Your job, if you have the wish to be generous, is just be generous and just leave it at that. Just be generous and don't worry about what he's going to do or not do with your offering. And that was really good advice, because I could see how even this generous intention, I had this self in there that had these opinions and ideas and this agenda. So tenderness is being gentle, usually in our speech, but I think it can flow out into our actions as well. Helping people to not be put off when we are doing things and talking with people. If we're really rough or curt with them, there's a closing down. I don't know if you all experience this, but if I can forgive people for being grouchy, or maybe someone's in a hurry or something. But if I'm trying to ask a question, especially when I was in school, if I was trying to ask a question of a teacher or something, and someone was kind of really abrupt with me or something, I always had this feeling of kind of closing down, trying to protect myself or something. So when I was reflecting on tenderness and why it might be one of these four wisdoms, for me what kept coming up was how important it is to take great care with our interactions with others, to be gentle in our speech and in our actions, so that we can always help people to keep an open heart, not giving others a reason to be afraid or to want to shut down or close off from us, so that we can all kind of stay in harmony. I think there's a lot of aspects of respecting others that goes into tenderness. We respect others' feelings, their points of view. So it's a gentleness when dealing with others. Benevolence, as I understand it, is the doing good aspect. So maybe if tenderness tends to primarily be a speech thing, maybe benevolence tends to primarily be an action thing. How can we find skillful ways of helping others? One important lesson that I have learned with this, with benevolence, and specifically with trying to do good for others, is not being a do-gooder. So we're not going out and trying and looking like, what can I go and do? What kind of good can I go and do? The good that we do arises naturally. It's not about going out and seeking something good to do. It's about being willing to help when the call comes. There was a point several years back when I guess I must have appeared to be trying to do a lot. And there's a wonderful line in a scripture that we read in February once a year called the Scripture of the Buddha's Last Teachings. And there's a line that says, be quick to go about doing services and work, but do not seek to amass tasks. And so my teacher reminded me about that once, where it's good to do good work. It's good to help others. It's good not to shy away from a difficult situation where someone might need our help. But something can get in the way when we step in and try to fix something. We get in our own way of our own good intention when it becomes a me. I'm gonna go and fix this situation. I have to be careful. I'll be hearing a conversation between two monks, and I'll think I have some sort of perspective on it. But I've learned by now, no, Allard, it's probably better not to go and try and get into their business and try and be some sort of mediating influence or like, here I have the golden piece of information that's going to save the day. It's like, if they want your advice or your opinion, they'll ask for it. But unless it's a dangerous situation or someone's looking for something and, oh, it's right here in my hand, I've got the spoon. Usually I would probably think twice or three times before trying to get involved, because I have to look carefully, when do I get in the way of the benevolent act? Just letting it, again, come, like all of these, coming from our meditation. Letting these things come from our meditation. The fourth one, sympathy. Sympathy's an interesting one for me to think about, because for me, I often think of sympathy and compassion together. But I don't know that they're exactly the same thing. Maybe different aspects. As Dogen expresses it in the Shishogi, sympathy is being able to identify ourselves with something that is not ourself. And usually this comes up in having sympathy for others. People in difficult situations, we endeavor to have sympathy for them. And I think there's an aspect of not judging people. That's what was coming to my mind when I was reflecting on it, how easy it can be to judge, get into a judging mind, and cultivating sympathy is trying not to judge others and what their situations may be, but just trying to be loving and sympathetic and kind if there's a direct interaction. How can I see that this person, my fellow human being, is dealing with conditions that may be difficult, painful? I have no idea what this person's day has been like, their month has been like, their life has been like. And one aspect of this one, but all of them, is can we do these things not just with people we like? It's easy to think about being sympathetic with our friends and family, but people who we would, quote, call our enemies, or people that we don't get along with, can we be sympathetic to them? There's been this buzzword lately, the tribe. I don't know if you all have been hearing this, but sometimes on the news I'll hear people talking about people being in their tribe. We're in our groups, and can we be sympathetic to others in the quote other group? Because these are our fellow human beings. can we not cut ourselves off from them and the conditions of their lives and what they're trying to work through in their lives? So those are some thoughts on sympathy. And one thing my teacher would tell me is that gratitude, I don't know if this is something that he thought up or something Reverend Master Jiu, his teacher, would say, but he would tell me that gratitude is the fifth wisdom, even though it's not listed. Reverend Master Jiu used to teach that.
And it's taught in Soto Zen.
Oh, good. And so Reverend Master Ando is saying that it's taught in Soto Zen. So it is even though it's not listed, gratitude, as you all know, is extremely important, and I find arises naturally when we begin to do the practice. Things in our daily life, just everything around us, the people, the conditions, as our meditation and our practice deepens, or as we become more comfortable and familiar with it, we may even find that we're grateful for even the difficulties in our lives, because it's an opportunity to practice being still and practicing these other four wisdoms. I often have this image of a weightlifter. Can we add 25 more pounds and see, well, can I bench press that? I don't know if that makes sense to you all, but the idea that the difficulties of our lives are not obstacles, and it's an opportunity to be still and find deeper compassion within ourselves. And I was talking with Reverend Master Ando before we started, and I was reflecting on how it was interesting to me that these 4 or 5 wisdoms, this word wisdom that is added to them, it's important. Charity, tenderness, benevolence, sympathy, gratitude, those are all things that can stand alone themselves, and yet here in this context we're calling them the 4 or the 5 wisdoms. So here they have taken on this elevated status of being wisdoms, and I was just reflecting on that and thinking about how as Reverend Master Ando pointed out, which I thought was really insightful, she was saying that the wisdom is the knowledge of the eternal, the knowledge of the Buddha nature. We start with our meditation practice. That is the core. If there was nothing else that we did, meditation, if there was nothing else that I could do in a day, I would meditate. If I had one thing I could do, I would at least try and meditate. Because it's from that place that the rest of our life of practice springs forth. And like Reverend Master Ando was saying, that knowledge of the eternal, that knowledge of the Buddha nature, that grows as we meditate. Our connection with that, our knowing that, not necessarily in an intellectual way, in a heart kind of way, that grows. And it's from that knowledge, that knowing of the eternal, that knowing of the Buddha nature, that still plays within meditation, however you want to call that or think about that. It's from that stillness that these things, these wisdoms come forth. It's not a wisdom that is intellectual. It's something, like Master Ando was saying to me, it's something that works. These things work. they create peace and harmony in our life. It's not an intellectual idea or philosophy. I mean, this is rubber meets the road, daily life stuff. This is being kind to someone you don't get along with. This is being generous when you don't feel very generous. Often I find myself in a situation where someone comes and asks me for help and there's something else I want to be doing. And it's like, I really don't want to give up my time right now to go help this person. And then I think to myself, well, come on, Allard, like, there it is. That's the practice. Why don't you just give up your time and go help this person? And so the wisdom is, maybe another part of that is the wisdom is not ours. The meditation is not necessarily ours. So again, here's Allard getting in the way. I don't really want to help this person. There's something else I want to be doing. Well, here I am getting in my own way, right? Here comes Allard getting in the way. But when I can get out of the way, these things just shine out. It's not me. I'm not these things. We're not these things. And yet there's nothing in us that is not a vehicle for these things. When we do our best to just let that stillness of meditation just kind of shine out, if that makes sense. So I think I'm going to end there. And I hope that made sense. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to switch chairs with Reverend Master Ando.
So may I just add, if you don't mind, Reverend Allard, that in our tradition in particular, in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition and in the Serene Reflection Meditation tradition, also the four wisdoms that Reverend Allard kind of explained to us are considered to be signs of enlightenment. These are the signs of enlightenment. They're also considered to be what carries beings to the other shore. They're Bodhisattva practices that carry us to the other shore out of suffering. So they're sound very simple, but very significant practices. And Buddhism has, as you've probably been hearing, if you've been coming to a number of these talks or reading about Buddhism, you will have seen that we have a lot of lists of things, right? We have the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And, in the early days of Buddhism, all the teaching was passed on orally. So things were sort of listed numerically so that people could easily understand them and memorize them. And in some traditions of Buddhism, they still do that, like in Sri Lanka. Young monks, can memorize entire texts, volumes of texts even. We have been more dependent on the written word. But so we have all these lists. We don't expect everybody to memorize them, of course. We have a lot of reading available. But I'm going to give you another little list here. But I thought it would be a nice way to look at a different window through which to look at our practice of meditation. And this is called the 5 Laws of the Universe, as Reverend Master Jiyu taught. And again, these are teachings that are rooted in ancient Buddhist teachings of the Buddha, but we've modernized them, they've been rewritten to make sense to people in our contemporary world. But I find these teachings very helpful, essentially how the universe works. I'm not talking about just the solar system or the cosmos, but everything, what actually works in our lives, what's actually going on, and why do we meditate? So for me, if you want a reason to meditate, studying these can be very helpful. But also what I'd like to point out a bit is that through the meditation practice, although it's a very simple practice and often referred to just as pure meditation, in fact, there's an awful lot going on. Because through the meditation practice, we are harmonizing ourselves with the laws of the universe. We're aligning ourselves with what actually is, what actually works. Great Master Dogen, in his writing, one of the first things that he wrote after he returned from China back to Japan, the rules for meditation, the Fukan Zazengi, he writes that the means of training, Buddhist training, are thousandfold, but pure meditation must be done. And the pure meditation is referred to also in Great Master Keizan's works. He's the great Soto Zen master 2 generations after Dogen in the 1300s. And he has also another writing called Instructions on How to Do Pure Meditation. He says that pure meditation opens us so that we may directly realize the foundation of our minds and dwell content within our own Buddha nature. The purpose of meditation, in a nutshell there. I'll read that again. Pure meditation opens us so that we may directly realize the foundation of our minds and dwell content within our own Buddha nature. This is called displaying our original face. It is also called revealing the landscape of our original nature, and so on and so forth. These, if you're interested in how to access some of these writings, we can talk about them later. But pure meditation is basically at the root of any spiritual practice if it's done well. And for us, we describe it as this practice of not deliberately trying to think, and also not trying not to think, just sitting with no deliberate thought. And why do we do this? It sounds kind of obscure at times. It's because we're really trying to get beyond a lot of our own personal opinions and notions and theories and all the superfluous stuff that influences us and often pulls us in directions that create suffering, and again help us to align more with what the truth really is and how the universe actually works. So let's look at these 5 laws of the universe in relation to meditation practice. Well, we have this little book. I think I mentioned it in the email that I sent out with the invitation. I mentioned a few publications that are on our website, our website's publications page. And this one's right at the bottom of the page. It often gets missed, but it's called An Introduction to the Tradition of Serene Reflection Meditation. And it's a really good, it covers a number of the teachings, including what Reverend Allard was talking about. It includes the Dogen's writings on the Shushogi, what is truly meant by training and enlightenment, and it includes those 4 wisdoms in it. And in there is an essay on the 5 laws of the universe written by Reverend Master Jiyu. So I'll quote her a little bit and then give you some of my reflections. I gave a more extensive Dharma talk on this once on a Sunday, much longer one, which I won't do now. But just to give you a few insights here. So, the first law of the universe is that the physical world is not answerable to my personal will. Does that sound familiar? Now, this one I think is particularly relevant to us at this time of pandemic and everything that's going on in our world. You know, gosh, everything's been turned upside down. I mean, many of you may have lost your jobs, or you can't go to your job in the usual way, can't visit your family and friends in the way you usually do. Really, our life has been turned around this year, and I think that if anything, if we've learned anything, hopefully as Buddhist practitioners, we're learning that the physical world is not answerable to our personal wills, right? Reverend Master comments here, my teacher, Reverend Master Jiyu, she says, I am not the cosmic Buddha, and there is nothing in me that is not of the cosmic Buddha. And she says, no Zen master ever says he is either enlightened or unenlightened. That which is, or the truth, is not a personal God. So we don't become God, but there's nothing in us that doesn't have Buddha nature, that isn't of the cosmic Buddha. Now, the thing about this is, this is one of the reasons why we meditate, obviously. As soon as you begin to meditate, you realize that you have to let go of the way you want things to turn out and to be. And it brings such peace of heart if you can find a place of acceptance. Just look at what's been happening in the world. The more we can sit still with it all, accept it, the more we can find some peace and find a way forward with it. And of course, people are doing that all over the world. Everybody has some intuitive knowledge of how to meditate and how to do this. This is really something that brings a lot of us to spiritual training, isn't it? That we realize that the universe, the physical world, is not answerable to me. I can't control. There's nothing really ultimately that we can control. We can't even ultimately control our bodies. We keep ourselves healthy. We feed ourselves. We do what we can, but eventually it's going to go. The mind might go. We might get dementia. Yeah, all these things are really ultimately beyond our personal will and control. However, there is that which we can align ourselves with, that which we can harmonize with. And this happens through meditation practice and through, out of that, all the other practices that we do. But at the heart of it, there has to be this pure meditation of not chasing after things in our minds, in our emotions, not grasping after things, and not repressing them, not pushing them away. The second law of the universe, Reverend Master calls it the law of change, sometimes in Buddhism referred to as anicca, the law of impermanence. So she comments here, there's no such thing as a separate or individual soul or spirit that goes to a God or a Buddha to live unchanged in its individuality at the time of physical death. The physical body parts from the seemingly individual part of the Buddha nature, which man mistakenly calls his soul or spirit at the time of what is presently described as death. The body in its present form is unplugged, she says, as it were, from the apparent life force, and disintegrates into various components, which turn again into other life forms or life-sustaining forces. It could be worms, maggots, compost, water, etc. Nothing whatsoever is being wasted. All is recyclable. So, again, an interesting aspect of this law of change, that our bodies, our minds are going to be totally changed, but they're all going to get recycled into something else. As we meditate, without meditation practice, it's very difficult, I think, to realize, to see things as they truly are. But this is one of the things that becomes apparent as we start to meditate and as we go deeper, that in fact, everything is changing all the time. And so within the meditation, we don't try to sort of hang on to a certain point so that we can avoid the change, but rather we do what we can to harmonize ourselves with the flow of change, to sit still within that flow, and if you like, become the flow, become a part of it. The third law of the universe is the law of karma, that the law of karma is inevitable and inexorable. And I won't go into the whole, quite a lengthy description and commentary by Reverend Master Jiyu on that in this little book. But of course, there is a law of cause and effect. And again, through meditation practice, we begin to see that we make connections. We begin to see how our thoughts, our actions, our choices have consequences, for good or for ill, or sometimes neutral. And it's so vital, and this is one of the most important teachings of Buddhism, is to see that we actually have a say in our own lives. We actually can change the direction of our lives. We can't control the external world, we can't control the body, but we can align ourselves with what actually works, what is ethical, what supports goodness, what creates merit, what creates good karma, what helps beings. Again, without the meditation practice, it's very hard to become still and aware and mindful enough to see the results of our choices, to see the patterns, so we just naturally begin to see little patterns. We begin to see, for example, perhaps there's a situation that always gets us upset, or a certain person, and we tend to, in our minds sometimes blame that person. It could be in politics, it could be in our personal lives, whatever it is, for our troubles. But as you meditate and you go on, you begin to see that very same thing happening with other people. And eventually, I know this in my experience, you begin to realize, there's sort of a common denominator in all of this. Maybe it has something to do with who's the common denominator? It's me. And when you realize that, it's so valuable. It can be painful, but you begin to understand something of the law of karma, and you begin to realize, I can actually do something about that. I'm not a victim of whatever is going on all around me. And people do become victimized, don't misunderstand me, but it's just so liberating to understand the law of karma through the eyes of meditation. A very gentle, gradual process of connecting with what the source of our suffering is, and and how we can change the course of our karma. So this is a very important teaching in Buddhism, and points to how real liberation is possible, real liberation from suffering. Yes, we can't control all external circumstances, but we can do something about ourselves. We can change the course of our karma. We can find peace even in the midst of complete chaos and madness, actually. Eventually. It takes time. And, I'm not there yet in all situations, but I can tell you after 45 years of meditating, it's made a huge difference. And I'm so deeply grateful for that. The fourth law of the universe is that, and this is an interesting one, without fail, evil is vanquished. Without fail, evil is vanquished and good prevails. Now, this too is inexorable, as well as the law of karma. In other words, ain't nothing we can do about that. These are just laws of the universe in the ethical realm that are just happening, like laws of physiology, laws of physics, laws of biology. These are laws in the realm of ethics. And there's nothing we can do about them. And again, in meditation, we gradually begin to realize, it's a whole lot easier just to give yourself over to the way things work, to these laws, if you like. We begin to find the comfort that they provide us. So that's an interesting one. If you look at the news too much, you might think that couldn't possibly be true. How could we say that evil without fail is vanquished and good prevails? But again, if you're meditating and you keep going with that, you will begin to see that there's just goodness is there at the heart of everything, at the heart of every person, and that it's just going to keep coming up no matter what you do. There's a scripture in Buddhism that talks about the 1,000 Buddhas are reaching out to help us, and we ignore it a lot of the time. But without fail, there's nothing we can do about that to change it. There's always help there. So without the meditation, again, you don't see the help that's there. You don't see the goodness that's there, and we often don't see the progress that human beings are making. Yes, sometimes there's a lot of progress in our world, and then there are reactions to it, and we have sort of a reactionary period. But then there's progress again. But as we go on, in a sense, even historically, if you like, the default setting changes, And as Reverend Master Gio often pointed out to us, there are many things, horrible things going on in the world, yes. And there are a lot of things that just nowadays are not acceptable anymore. Laws that we've created, things that people used to get burned at the stake in the streets. They used to get hung in the street. I mean, it still happens, but not to the same degree. So there is, even amongst human beings, believe it or not, there is progress. But most of all, as an incentive to meditate, if you sit still, don't chase after things in your mind and in your emotions, and don't repress them, you will always connect with the peace and the goodness in your own heart. and the path will be opened for you. You'll find the next step, and you'll begin to see that you are indeed making progress. You'll begin to see things as they really are. You'll begin to see the Buddha nature more deeply in others. I could say a lot more about that, but that's kind of an interesting one, and Buddhism might be seen as, I think, very realistic, very practical, but also quite optimistic, because it knows that in truth we can never crush, the innate goodness in beings, and even in nature. I remember years ago, just living in London, England, walking in the city. It was all concrete, and just noting that in the cracks of the concrete, these flowers were coming up and the grass was coming up. And even though we sort of trashed a lot of our world, nature just keeps working. It keeps doing its work. I think that's part of this law of the universe, that goodness is always going to keep arising, no matter what. You really can't crush it. So I think it's important to, maybe that law of the universe speaks to the importance of faith and how meditation grows faith, because it puts us in touch. It takes us below all our thoughts and our feelings and opinions and puts us in touch with what really is and what really matters and what really works. So the fifth law of the universe, how's our time, by the way?
7:20.
Okay. The fifth law of the universe is that the intuitive knowledge of Buddha nature occurs to everyone. It occurs to all. Yeah? So another way of saying that is that all beings, all people, all beings have intuitive knowledge of Buddha nature. Okay? We may not realize it, they may not realize it, but it's like just there. There's no way you can avoid that. It's the source of all goodness, all kindness, and so on. So the reason, that's an interesting law of the universe, isn't it? But again, through meditation, we begin to realize that we are capable of our minds are pure at heart. There's a pure awareness that we can trust, that is beyond judgments and opinions. It just sees things clearly. So we more and more harmonize with that, and also that we develop a longing to connect with that Buddha nature in others. So since all beings have an intuitive knowledge of the Buddha nature, we learn more and more over time to speak to that, to address that in our dealings with other beings. Yeah. And it can just be in lots of ordinary ways. I'm not talking about anything special. It just happens naturally, as Reverend Allard was saying, through our training and through our meditation. But again, without the meditation practice, it's very hard to get the depth of experience, the quiet, if you like, the stillness of mind and heart, to see, to see that purity in another person, to see the Buddha nature and see what's actually helpful. So years ago, I was tutoring English as a second language. I was doing teaching work and tutoring work, and I was a Buddhist, and I used this law of the universe to help me in my work, actually, because I realized so many students didn't trust themselves and just didn't have the confidence to bring out, their unique qualities. And so I found that law of the universe was very helpful. So it has a very practical application as well. So those are the 5 laws of the universe. Reverend Master Jiu says about the last one, all beings have the intuitive knowledge of the Buddha nature. Hence the creation of religions and precepts down the centuries. Where have all those teachings come from, right? It's no one person, no one man or woman's creation. It's something that we're all connected to, and it comes up in different ways over the centuries. When mankind does not heed this intuitive knowledge, body and spirit separate, and the cycle of birth, old age, disease, and death becomes as a binding cord from which we cannot be free until we again decide to heed the still small voice within which the voice of that intuitive knowledge which comes directly from the non-personal Buddha nature. It's kind of interesting. She says, as a result of modern thinking, we educate our children away from this, and with the spread of materialism, we increasingly look for the cure of physical and mental illness outside of ourselves rather than within, and the young can become steadily more confused at an earlier and earlier age. And that certainly does happen. Again, this is a way that a meditator can be of help to know that all beings have the Buddha nature, and to encourage young people, encourage each of us to trust that within ourselves. So there you have it, the laws of the universe. I don't know if you've heard about that teaching before, but very interesting reflections. And again, in my experience, all these doctrines, truths, teachings in Buddhism, they become your own experience. You will experience these things for yourself in meditation. And it's one of the reasons why Serene Reflection or Soto Zen tradition emphasizes meditation practice as a foundational teaching and practice, because to really affect change in yourself and in the world, you have to eventually know this for yourself, and you will. You know, we start off by reading it and intellectually getting some concept of it, which is helpful, but ultimately it becomes part of our blood and bones, and we can know these truths from our own experience, and then there's real transformation happens. It's gradual, but real transformation happens. Very deep peace, very deep ability to be a benefit to others without necessarily having any idea you're doing it, because you're just doing what's good to do, what's natural, what works. Yeah. So that's that, and I'll end with a little quote just to support this, because especially at this time, a lot of people are very frightened. It's been very difficult. We have the hope of a vaccine coming, of course, but still, there's tremendous suffering going on with illness and people dying of the coronavirus, financial hardship, and so on. This is a little quote from Reverend Master Jiyu, my teacher's master, Kato Chisan. I've always kept this for myself if I ever get anxious or worried. He says, life is only a frightening thing without meditation. If we really live it, we must meditate. And he says, if you meditate, you run the risk of being grabbed by the cosmic Buddha. That was one of his expressions. In other words, don't be surprised if it works and you find yourself being employed in a different way in this universe.